Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're breaking down how to read an elk basin in 5 minutes because most elk hunters waste days trying to figure out what they could have diagnosed in just one structured scan. If you hunt western public land elk, you've stood on a ridge staring into a basin wondering, is this worth my time? That single decision can shape your entire season. Make the wrong call and you burn 3 days in dead country. Make the right call and you stack opportunity before a lot of guys even realize what they're looking at. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent hunter and outdoorsman. So here's the reality. Elk basins are not random bowls of terrain. They're behavioral systems, elevation bands, prevailing winds, thermal patterns, feed to bed proximity, escape routes, and hunting pressure all shape how elk use that space. When you understand that structure, you're going to stop reacting to sightings and start predicting movement. This episode is not about glassing longer. It is about diagnosing faster. It is about stepping onto a ridge and knowing within minutes whether that basin you're looking at deserves your boots, your time, and your energy. By the end of this episode, you will know exactly how I evaluate a basin in under 5 minutes, whether I am e-scouting in July or bow hunting in September or hunting late season migration routes in October and November. So let's get into it. Why do most hunters misread basins? Well, most hunters evaluate basins emotionally instead of structurally. They climb to a vantage point, look out over a massive sweep of alpine country, and they feel something. Big skyline, deep timber pockets, long ridges fading into the distance. It looks like elk country, so they assume it is elk country. They prioritize size. They prioritize remoteness. They prioritize dramatic terrain. And somewhere in that process, they start equating elk with wilderness aesthetics. But that's backwards. Elk don't choose basins because they're beautiful. They choose basins because they function. A basin can be enormous and completely useless if it lacks tight security transitions, consistent thermals, and compressed feed to bed distance. If elk have to travel too far between food and cover, or if swirling winds constantly betray them, they will not live there consistently, no matter how good and wild it looks. On the flip side, a smaller, less impressive basin with stacked benches, north-facing bedding timber, adjacent feed, and clean air movement can hold elk year after year. It might not impress you visually, but it solves problems for elk, and that's what matters. Another common mistake is glassing without structure. Hunters sit down and immediately start scanning open slopes, hoping to see something. They're searching for animals instead of reading terrain. They're reacting instead of predicting. When I step into a basin, I'm not asking, do I see elk? I'm asking, does this basin solve daily survival problems for elk? Does it create predictable movement? Will it hold elk once pressure hits? You're not hunting scenery, you're hunting structure, and structure determines decisions. Next, I want to give you the 60-second elevation and season check because the first minute is about season alignment. Before I analyze timber, benches, or glassing knobs, I ask one simple question. Does this elevation match the phase of the season? You can't evaluate a basin properly if you ignore timing. So I ask, what time of season is it? Where should elk logically be right now? Early September archery season, mature bulls are often holding higher elevation bands, especially where pressure is low. They're using north-facing bedding timber above primary feeding shelves. They want cool air, consistent thermals, and vertical escape routes. Mid-October rifle, after multiple storms, that changes the equation. Now I'm looking for migration corridors, mid-elevation benches, and terrain that funnels elk as snow pushes them. Lower feed transitions start to matter more than alpine feed. If I'm standing at 95,000 feet in mid-October and the basin tops out at little over 10,000 with no lower exit, no connected migration routes, and no slope that bleeds into transitional country, I already know something is off. I might be hunting where elk were, but not where they're going. Elevation bands must match the seasonal phase. Within the first 60 seconds, I'm trying to identify upper elevation escape routes that connect to bigger country, mid slope benches that offer bedding and stability, lower feeding transitions that allow vertical movement, snowline markers or moisture indicators that influence forage. If those elevation bands do not connect logically, the basin drops in my priority immediately. Elk are vertical animals, they live in layers. Basins that stack elevation intelligently with usable movement between bands are the ones that consistently produce. Next, I shift to air movement. Wind is not a side factor, it is the architecture of elk movement. Terrain tells you where elk can go, wind tells you where they will go. In the first few minutes of evaluating a basin, I'm not just looking at ridge lines and timber pockets. I'm visualizing how air will move through that bowl from daylight to dark. So ask yourself, where will morning thermals rise once the sun hits those slopes? Where will evening thermals fall as shadows stretch across the basin? Are there secondary ridges creating cross currents or dead air pockets? A basin with chaotic, swirling wind is extremely difficult to hunt consistently. You might see elk there, but closing distance becomes more unpredictable. One with clean, readable thermals, that flow gives you structure. It gives you approach options. It allows you to plan your positioning instead of just gambling. Within 5 minutes, I'm identifying the primary prevailing wind for the day, how sun exposure will influence the thermal direction, ridges that create wind shear or turbulence, fingers, benches, or lower pockets that tend to hold stable air. If bedding timber sits in a place where thermals dump unpredictably, elk may avoid it. If you can't approach that timber without contaminating multiple escape routes, the basin immediately loses value. Elk choose locations where air protects them. They bed where they can smell below and watch above. They travel where wind favors them. If the wind structure is wrong, nothing else matters. Feed, elevation, and pressure are secondary. Air determines everything. Now we look for compression. Elk don't use an entire basin evenly. They live within tight behavioral corridors that solve three problems every single day: where to feed, where to bed, and how to travel between the two safely. When I evaluate a basin, I'm not scanning randomly. I'm mapping that triangle, right? I look for north facing dark timber that allows or offers thermal protection and security for bedding. I look for adjacent open slopes, parks, or transitional feed that provides groceries within reasonable distance. Then I identify the connective tissue, right? Those are your benches, your finger ridges, your subtle shelves and saddles that allow elk to move efficiently without exposing themselves. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory, it's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. Compression happens when feed, bed, and travel all exist within a tight vertical or horizontal window. The tighter that triangle is stacked, the more predictable elk movement becomes. If feed sits 2 miles away from security cover, elk have to travel further, often at night, and movement becomes harder to intercept. If feed is only 300 to 500 yards below bedding timber within a defined bench connecting the two, movement windows shrink, and that creates opportunity for you. In a 5 minute scan, I try to ask one simple question: is this basin compressed or spread out? If everything is stretched wide with no clear travel funnels, elk movement becomes random and difficult to pattern. But when terrain stacks tightly, dark timber above, feed below, a bench connecting them, and a saddle narrowing their travel, now you're looking at repeatable structure. Compressed basins produce consistent encounters. Spread basins produce wandering elk and frustrated hunters. Compression creates predictability. It's your friend. Next, I evaluate human behavior because you're not just hunting elk, you're hunting pressured elk. Pressure is one of the fastest forces that reshapes a basin, faster than snow, faster than feed change, faster than weather swings. The moment boots hit trailheads, elk behavior adjusts. In the first 5 minutes of studying a basin, I'm not only analyzing the terrain, I'm analyzing the access to it. I look for trailheads that dump I look for trailheads that dump directly into the drainage. I look for ATV accessible ridge lines or logging spines that allow easy penetration. Identify glassing knobs visible from roads where hunters are likely to sit at daylight. I think about horse access routes that make deeper pockets more reachable than they appear on a map. And then I ask the real question: where will pressure push elk once opening morning hits? If hunters approach from the bottom, elk often climb and side hill into darker timber pockets. If pressure comes from above, elk may slide into lower benches or secondary drainages. I start scanning for those secondary security pockets, the less obvious benches tucked off main ridge lines, the darker north faces that require extra effort, the small hidden shelves that a lot of hunters just walk past. A basin that looks perfect but is easily accessible is not perfect and will not hunt the same after day one. If your plan relies on elk behaving like it's preseason scouting, you're already behind. You have to anticipate pressure before it happens. You must hunt where elk move under pressure, not where they stand before it. Pressure reshapes basins faster than weather. If you ignore it, you're going to constantly feel one step behind. Next, let's discuss the actual 5 minute decision making framework, because at the 5 minute mark, I make a decision, not a hopeful decision, not an emotional one, a structured one. And a lot of hunters linger too long in uncertainty. They keep glassing, they keep hiking, they tell themselves they just need one more look. But what they're really doing is avoiding a decision. I don't allow that drift. I grade the basin across 5 pillars. Elevation alignment. Does the elevation match the current phase of the season, and does it stack logically with usable vertical movement? Wind predictability. Can I approach, reposition, and hunt this basin consistently without contaminating multiple escape routes? Feed to bed compression. Are feeding, bedding, and travel corridors tight enough to create predictable movement windows without being too spread out? Pressure resistance. Where will elk shift once hunters enter the basin, and does this terrain offer secondary security? Access advantage. Do I have a positioning edge, or is this basin equally available to everybody else? If three or more of those pillars are weak, I move on. I don't negotiate with myself. If four are strong, I'll probably commit and I'll hunt it intentionally. Indecision here burns seasons. It wastes daylight, energy, and mental clarity. The longer you hesitate, the more you drift towards average results. Fast, structured decisions build seasons. You're not guessing, you're filtering. And filtering removes low probability country pretty quickly. It preserves your focus for basins that actually solve elk problems. 5 disciplined minutes can save you 5 wasted days, and that margin is often the difference between opportunity and tag soup. This episode wouldn't be complete without covering some common mistakes. And there are a handful of basin mistakes I see over and over again, and every one of them quietly drains seasons. Mistake number one is falling in love with remoteness. Hunters assume that if it's far, steep, and miserable to reach, it must hold elk. And I like that philosophy in a lot of ways, but distance alone does not create security. If that basin lacks compression, Clean thermals and layered escape routes, remoteness will not save it. You can hike 10 miles into bad structure just as easy as one. Mistake number two is overglassing open slopes while ignoring the timber edges. Elk spend a limited amount of time fully exposed. The real information sits at the edges, where dark timber meets feed, where benches disappear into cover, where shade starts creeping downhill. If you only scan bright hillsides, you're going to miss most of the behavior. Mistake number three is ignoring exit routes during pressure spikes. Opening morning changes everything. If you don't know where elk will shift to when pressure enters the basin, you're going to always arrive one move too late. Basins are dynamic. Pressure reshapes them instantly. Mistake number four is hunting where elk were, not where they will be. Sign from last week does not necessarily guarantee presence today. Structure predicts future movement. Old sightings does not. Mistake number five is letting one bugle override structural flaws. One sound can emotionally anchor a hunter into poor terrain, but if the basin fails your five pillars, the odds are going to remain low. Elk presence is probably temporary there. Terrain structure is permanent, and I'd encourage you to hunt the structure. A basin should not take you days to understand. If it does, you're either emotionally attached to it or structurally unclear. When you train your eye to evaluate elevation bands, thermals, feed to bed compression, and pressure all in 5 disciplined minutes, you're going to remove hesitation from your process. You stop drifting. You stop negotiating with low probability country. You stop burning daylight in terrain that simply looks good. 5 minutes of structure eliminates 80% of wasted time, and that speed compounds. Over the course of 7-day hunts, that might mean you evaluate 15 basins but only commit to 3. Over the course of a season, it means you stop chasing sign and start hunting systems. You stop reacting to elk and start predicting them. You will hunt fewer basins, but you will hunt the right ones, and that changes outcomes, because success on Western public land rarely comes from grinding harder in average country. It comes from identifying high probability structure quickly and committing without hesitation. That discipline is what separates a lot of consistent elk hunters from just hopeful hunters. If you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that is exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and how to position accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. If you want hands-on application and real-time breakdowns and scenarios, we have an in-person elk camp 2026 that is built around this same philosophy: structure, preparation, and execution in real terrain. You can check that out at backboneunlimited.com. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, a classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication with me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all of you. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.